I'd like to thank Crystalline Eyewear for sponsoring the production costs of this episode. For those of you who've been to their location, you will agree that they provide the largest selection of designer eyewear for all budgets with exceptional customer service and most conveniently, direct billing for all insurance companies. Check out their website at crystaleyewear.ca and follow them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for special coupons and promotions that you can use towards your next eyewear purchase. Assalamu alaikum, hello, and welcome to another episode of It's All Relative. Thank you so much for joining us once again. When we think of Muslim scholars or Islamic educators, you're not wrong if you come up with strict or stern or rigid. And up until recently, social media was not even something we would associate with Islamic education or Islamic teachings. I'm incredibly honored and very excited and humbled to have with us Shaykh Azhar Nasser with us today, who uses social media very actively, along with his incredibly unique sense of humor and wittiness on how he promotes Islamic teachings and Islamic education. So without wasting much time, let's find out exactly what inspires the man behind the tweets. Shaykh Azhar, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate you taking the time to be here. Thank you so much.
It's my honor to be here.
Ahsan. In order to get started, I thought we can begin with tell us a little bit about your background. You know, what you've been up to for the last few years, and what really inspired you to get into or becoming a Muslim or an Islamic scholar.
So just a little bit about my background. My parents are originally from Iraq, and my family's they've been in the United States for several decades. You know, my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, actually received a scholarship when he was 18 years old in the 1950s.
Wow.
So my family has been, in the West for an incredibly long time, which is why, in many ways, I actually have more in common with converts than I do with people back home. So my maternal grandfather was here since the 1950s. He studied in California, and then he completed his master's and his PhD from Michigan State University. And my father migrated to the United States from Iraq shortly after the rise of Hizb al-Ba'ath in Iraq.
Okay.
So, we've been in the U.S. for a very long time, and growing up, we all lived. I was living with my parents, and we actually lived with my maternal grandparents. So, if I were to identify one person that really had an incredible impact on my life, on my upbringing, I would have to say that it's my grandfather. I don't come from a family of scholars. I wasn't fortunate to have that road paved for me. But I do remember that even though my grandfather wasn't a Muslim scholar, he was a very devout Muslim. Mm-hmm. And I remember even when I was a little kid, because we lived in the same house, I can still hear my grandfather reciting his Fajr prayers every morning.
Wow.
And he would actually, after he'd do his salah, I would even hear him make tea and make coffee. And he used to spend about 30 minutes after Fajr reciting the Quran. I mean, I grew up, in that type of environment. And he invested a lot of time in me. I think that he saw from a very young age I had a keen interest in religion. So my grandfather essentially took me under his wing. And, my bedtime stories when I was young, were actually Qasas al-Anbiya.
Wow.
So my grandfather would come into my room, and almost every night before I'd go to bed, he'd share with me, some verses of the Quran, some stories of the prophets, and I was just glued. Most kids grow up and their superheroes are like Spider-Man and Batman. But for me, growing up, even from a very young age, for me, my heroes were Musa alayhi salam. They were Ibrahim, Rasulullah, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib. So he really instilled the love of the Quran and the love of these holy personalities in me from a very, very young age.
Right.
And, coming from a Middle Eastern family, when you grow up, there's this expectation that, your options in life are limited, at least career-wise, So my family always pushed me to become a medical doctor.
Wow.
And so when I was in college, when I was at the University of Michigan, I majored in cultural anthropology, but I was also a pre-med student. So, I took all my prerequisites, I took all, the organic chemistry and the biology and all of that. And I took my MCAT and, I was getting ready to transition to medical school. And then I had an epiphany that, I have to want to do this. Right? Because I'm the one that has to wake up every morning.
Yep.
And the bulk of my life is going to be dedicated to this.
Yeah.
And what came to mind was a famous quote that I read from the famous ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle, where he says, pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work.
Wow.
I knew that I'd be good at it. I had the knowledge, and I would imagine that I would have been a good doctor. But would I have been an exceptional doctor? Probably not, because the passion wasn't there. So I had a deep passion for the study of religion because, when I look at human society, I really feel that the most dangerous of illnesses are not necessarily the physical ailments. I think that a lot of the problems that we see in human society stem from moral decay, spiritual ailments. So I ended up becoming a doctor, but just a different type of doctor,
right.
A spiritual physician.
Right. Excellent, Hassan. Now, obviously, you're very well known for your activity on social media, Twitter in particular. What I wanted to ask is, was the decision to use social media as your platform to promote Islamic education, Islamic teachings, was it a conscious decision after you became a scholar, or was it something that growing up since the beginning of social media you were on it and you were comfortable on it and you just kind of continued? Or is it a conscious decision that you made saying that now I'm an educator or I'm a scholar, I would like to use this platform to promote the religion?
I'd love to claim that I'm that calculated, but if I'm going to be honest, I was using social media, before I went to the seminary, and I try to stay away from the word scholar because I'm uncomfortable calling myself a scholar, and you may ask me, so why do you wear the imam? Why do you wear the turban? For me, the turban represents a decision to dedicate my life to the pursuit of knowledge. The Islamic tradition is so vast that I'm a firm believer that you actually have to start your Islamic education, your hawza training, when you're 12, 13, 14 years old, and you have to study for decades upon decades to emerge as an alim. So in my humble estimation, someone like Grand Ayatollah Sistani is a scholar. Someone like, Ayatollah Wahid Khurasani, a scholar, Sayyid al-Khou'i, Shaykh al-Na'ini. These are ulama. The rest of us we're students. So, I was on social media even before, I completed my seminary studies. And I don't even like to use the word completed because you're never done learning. But it wasn't really a conscious decision. I was just being a normal guy, right?
Okay.
We like to share our experiences.
Right.
I share things that I find inspirational, that I find moving. And it just ended up resonating with people. I didn't have like this plan that, I am going to say something funny and attract the youth to Islam, and I have this like grand plan. It just happened, It just people, they found, some of the things that I say to be inspirational. It resonated with them. It was relatable, and that's pretty much how it went.
Okay, good. So on that same token, sharing is one thing, but the way you share is another. And obviously, I'm sure a lot of people in the audience as well know that there's a certain approach to the way you share your content. You know, there's a lot of humor that you bring, a lot of wittiness that you bring to your content that you put out there. This approach of using humor and joy, is it just, do you think, is that the new way of promoting Islam or connecting with Muslims? What's your take on that? Is that something that you had in mind before taking on that approach of using humor and wittiness to your content?
You know, I think it's a misconception to say that, you know, using humor to educate people and to bring them towards Islam is a new phenomenon. In fact, I would argue that using humor and lightheartedness is actually a revival of the Sunnah of the Prophet.
Really?
You know, I don't consider what I'm doing to be anything novel. You know, because if you look at the biography of the Prophet was known to be someone who was very pleasant. The Prophet used humor. You know, even when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the people of paradise. You know, many people don't know this, but if you look at Surah Yasin, there's an ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, you know, Inna ashab al-jannati al-yawma fi shughulin fakihun, that the people of paradise today are fakihun. And the word fakihun comes from the word mufaka, which means to joke with one another.
Really?
So Allah describes the way that believers interact with one another in paradise as, you know, they're endearingly playful, right? There's a lightheartedness about them. So, you know, again, you know, the Prophet had a sense of humor. And that's why I believe Islam spread, because the Prophet was so approachable. Right. He was so relatable. He made people feel joyful. You know, he lifted people's spirits. So the use of humor, you know, being relatable is actually the sunnah of the Messenger of Allah. I mean, I would be lying to you if I claimed that I was introducing something that was unique or novel.
Interesting. That's a very interesting take on it. Like a lot of people, you know, I've looked at your Twitter feed, which is what you're most active on, and I've seen all sorts of tweets that you've put out there. Whether it's marriage, family relationships, Donald Trump, suicide, gun control, mental health, Snapchat, Islamophobia, prayer, hijab. How do you come up with these? Is it something that's conceived from questions that you receive from people? Do you just wake up one morning saying, today I'm going to bash Donald Trump? Like how does it work? Like where does all this stuff come from?
So, you know, some of the things that I talk about on social media come to mind because of certain questions that people ask me.
Right.
And, you know, as a side note, I think it's important for me to mention that, you know, when people reach out to me and they ask me a question, you know, I take confidentiality very seriously. You know, there are people, you know, because of the position that I'm in, you know, they confide in you, right? They share with you, you know, very private information.
Absolutely.
And, you know, almost everything, especially if it's clear that this person wants this to be private, you know, there are a lot of conversations that I have with people, a lot of questions that I will take to the grave. You know, even my closest family members don't even know about some of the questions that people ask. So I take confidentiality very seriously, and I think that, you know, sometimes when people read, you know, some of the questions and answers that I pose,
right,
they think that, oh, you know, why are you, you know, sharing this? Why are you exposing, you know, these conversations? And if you see, I never post names, right?
Of course, yeah.
And I try to keep it very general, where, you know, no one is really going to know, you know, who I'm referring to, you know, or who asked that question. So a lot of times the questions that people ask, if I see that a lot of people are asking about a specific topic, I might make a comment about it. And, you know, sometimes it's just my own reflection. You know, I think that, you know, I find myself, you know, spending some time every day just thinking about the condition of the ummah, the condition of the Muslim community in the world, the condition of humanity. And, you know, we live we live in very troubling times. This is a time of fitna. I think that when you look at the hadith literature, I would argue that we are living in Akhir zaman. So there are a lot of tribulations, there are a lot of challenges, and some of the things that I talk about represent what I find troubling in our times, and what I find what are some of the things that need to change, what are some things that we actually have to think about. So I mean, the sources of inspiration are many. Sometimes it's just an idea comes to mind. So it comes from a number of different sources.
Good, but I'm sure with that comes some level of criticism based on the way you approach certain issues. Do you receive a fair bit of criticism? And if you do, how do you deal with it?
It's not only criticism. Sometimes we even receive death threats.
Wow.
So I remember when I posted a tweet or a comment, encouraging Muslims to reach out to their Christian neighbors and Jewish neighbors during the holiday season, and wishing them a happy holiday.
I remember those Christmas tweets. Yeah.
You get people that the haram police who come around and say, Rasulullah didn't do this. Show me a hadith where it tells us it's okay to wish happy holidays. So yeah, you're gonna get criticism, and I think that when you're in the public eye, that's just that comes with the territory. You are going to be criticized, and the way that I handle it is in the beginning it's not easy. It's kind of a shock that you have people that are cheering you on. And then you have people that are just spewing venom, making some very hostile comments. So the way that I deal with it is that at the end of the day, Allah's pleasure is the most important thing. As long as my relationship with Him is good, that I'm not doing anything to disobey Him or incur His wrath. That's what I try to keep in mind. And furthermore, I always tell myself, especially if people make insulting comments, I tell myself that, listen, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam was cursed from the pulpits for almost 90 years. So if he didn't escape slander, why should I expect, special treatment?
Okay. Now, obviously you've got a very large following on Twitter and Facebook. I think we've almost got 40,000 followers on Twitter, and you're in the thousands on Facebook as well. I'm sure as a result, your Twitter feed is extremely interactive. There's people writing to you all the time. There's people retweeting, sharing, commenting on everything that you put out there. How do you balance your time? I mean, because I'm sure your phone's blowing up every day. How do you manage that? Like, because you're a father, you're a husband, you've got other roles as well in the family and professionally. So how do you make time for how much time you're going to spend on social media, respond, or at least just keep track of what's going on on your feed? How do you balance all that, including other areas of your life?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that it's overwhelming, because every day you get bombarded with questions. Wow. And everyone who asks you a question is telling you that this is urgent.
He's expecting a reply. Yes.
Everybody, and the thing is, people expect you to reply instantaneously. As though that their question is the only question that you've received. So it initially it is overwhelming, and even if a couple of days ago my wife bought me a portable charger, because
the power bank,
because your phone just dies because of the notifications.
Right.
But you have to make a conscious decision that you dedicate a certain amount of time to that world. Yeah. But my family is my priority.
Absolutely.
So when I'm home, I have a responsibility to them, right? So I have to give them their due right. I have a daughter, so I'm not going to spend time on Twitter and take away from her. I have I have family, I have extended family.
Of course.
So I designate a time where I'm on social media.
Right.
But beyond that, you have to unplug. You
Absolutely.
have to unplug because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to ask me about my Twitter followers.
Yeah.
But he's going to ask me, about the members of my family who are under my roof. So,
absolutely.
Allah's going to ask me, okay, did you fulfill their rights?
Yeah.
Did you give them enough attention? Because I think what happens a lot is that, Muslim scholars, they, and this is a danger, they spend so much time guiding the community, directing the community, that oftentimes their families pay the price. Which is why, I've seen families fall apart because of that.
Wow.
And I'm not going to make that mistake, which is why, like, even when I receive, speaking invitations, I tell, communities that want to invite me that my family comes with me, I'm not going to spend months away from my family. So, we're a package deal, right? Absolutely. I'm not just an individual, when you invite me, I have, my wife, my children, and I try to limit my travels, but I make sure that they're with me.
Right. I was told to ask you this. It is you who's tweeting, though, right? It's not you haven't outsourced it to someone else.
It's offensive that you would think that it's anyone other than me.
Okay, so I'm glad you've cleared that, because I was told to make sure I ask you that question. Just to wrap things up now. You've been in Toronto for a few days, and based on the theme of your lectures at Bathurst, you're talking about trying to be positive in an increasingly negative world.
Yeah.
We live in a world where being Muslim is extremely difficult.
Yeah.
Not just publicly. Publicly, it's obvious. But internally as well.
Yeah.
Trying to be steadfast and stay on the right path and being true to our values. What is your advice, or if you have some sort of a framework or a starting point, for somebody who wishes to strengthen their faith? Let's assume that we've been disconnected for a while with our faith, and now we're ready to make that decision that, okay, I want to come back. I want to start my journey back to being who I'm supposed to be. What's your advice to someone when they want to start reconnecting themselves with the deen and with the faith?
What I always tell people is that, I think we underestimate the importance of the basics. When people want to get closer to God, I always say this, that there is this impression that there is some type of secret that I need to find out. That getting close to God is like the Holy Grail. It's something that's elusive, it's mysterious, it's something that only the people that are in Qom or Najaf, they know it. It's like some type of secret that we're trying to access. I really believe that, we just got to go back to the basics. Something as simple as performing your prayers on time will have a profound effect on your spirituality. The problem with the average Muslim today, in my opinion, I don't think it's knowledge. I think that your average Muslim knows the basics, right?
Right.
I think the problem is that we're not applying what we already know. People think that, okay, I need to listen to one more lecture. I need to listen to one more majlis. No, maybe you need to apply what you heard in that first majlis. People used to come to Ayatollah Bahjat. They used to ask him for advice. And then they'd come the next day, give us more advice. He'd ask them, did you apply what I told you yesterday? You came back. There's a hadith from Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, our fifth Imam, that always resonates with me. And the hadith goes like this. The Imam alayhi salam says, practice what you know, so Allah will teach you what you don't know. Wow. So we know that we have the 5 obligatory prayers. I really think that your relationship with Allah sets the tone for all other relationships. That vertical relationship determines the health of all of the other horizontal relationships with other people. I was having a conversation with my wife last night, and we were talking about, this idea of reconnecting with our faith. And she mentioned a pretty interesting analogy. She told me that, people are trying to install windows when there's no house, right?
Right.
You know, we're trying to do all of these mustahabbat, you know, we're trying to listen to all of these lectures, do all of these things, but there's no foundation, right?
Ah, interesting.
So you got to build the foundation, and the foundation is the halal and the haram, right?
Right.
You know, anyone who tells you that, you know, you don't need fiqh, you know, you don't need all these do's and don'ts, these rules, just, you know, just focus on spirituality. You know, the base, the foundation of spirituality is the sharia. Is, you know, are those do's and don'ts.
Right.
So don't underestimate the importance of applying the basics.
Excellent. Shaykh Azhar, I just want to take this opportunity and thank you from the bottom of my heart. Yeah, I know your schedule here is extremely tight and you still made some time for us. Thank you so much. And I'm sure as much as I've been enlightened with what you've said and I'm learning more about you, I'm sure the audience has as well and appreciate it as well. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for being with us today. I hope you've all enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to reach out to Shaykh Azhar, I will be putting all his social media information at the bottom on the bottom of the screen. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. And once again, thank you so much to Crystalline Eyewear for sponsoring the production costs of this episode. Please head over to their website for special coupons that you can use when you visit them. Once again, thank you so much, and inshallah, I will see you on the next episode. Thank you. Bye-bye.